All right, and we're back with another Roofr Masterclass. Welcome, everybody. I'm your host, Pete, with my co-host, Nick, back off of his wedding hiatus there. It's been a little bit since we've had the band together here.
Exactly. It's good to be back.
Yeah, back to be at it together here. So
Batman and Robin back together.
Yeah, back together, a reunion here. So yeah, excited for this one. Obviously, job board and process stuff is one of my favorite topics. So excited to kind of talk through some of this stuff and share some stuff with you guys. So, but I'm sure we have some housekeeping stuff, right, Nick, to jump into really quick first, and then we'll
rock and roll.
Get into it here.
Perfect.
There we go.
Awesome. So as Pete mentioned, your host, Pete, the Batman to my Robin, is if you guys need anything, you could always email us. We have the two easiest emails in the world, pete@roofr.com and nick@roofr.com.
Yeah. Yes. All of our master classes are recorded, available on YouTube and on roofr.com in the resources section. Lots of great stuff in there. We have the Roofr Academy stuff. We have blog articles that Joel in the background has been working on fine tuning. I know, we've got the podcasts in there. If you haven't seen the Roofr of the Month series, those are in there, and then obviously
sessions too.
Yes. Yeah. So you got a lot of stuff going on in there. If you guys have not checked that out, if you have feedback on any of this stuff, specifically about the masterclass, we're always looking to get better. There will be a survey at the end of this. You can jump on and take that survey for us. That's much appreciated. Or you can email Joel directly. Joel's been in the chat for us. Hit up Joel and let him know if you've got some specific feedback on how the masterclass is set up, or if you just like Nick's hair today and just want to make a comment on it, whatever it is.
Sometimes you get good hair days. Sometimes you have bad. This one I'm in the middle with.
Yeah.
I'll deal with it.
I'll take it.
You just always got a good flow, Pete. It's just
mine's just
what was it?
The high and tight haircut.
For those who are in the know, you'll know. But if you haven't, there was a masterclass where we did, and somebody commented that he liked Pete's haircut, always high and tight. But awesome. And just some updates here. If you want to register to join our next masterclass on August 5th, where we're going to be talking about texting and emailing through Roofr, why it's a game changer for your process. Spoiler alert, it is a game changer. I'll drop two stats right off the bat. Emailing and texting is going to, text open rates are closer to 90%, where email open and read rates are closer to that 50%, 50 to 60% mark there. So that's a huge point there. And being able to email and text right off the bat to increase that speed to lead conversion is going to increase your closing percentage, especially off of fresh leads that come into your system, by 7 times. If you haven't seen our top takeaways from our industry report, take 3 minutes to learn which strategies get you more business and which don't. That's all in there as well. As Pete mentioned, we have a Roofr of the Month. Our next one is coming up very soon, as we're coming up to the end of July. But July's was an amazing one, a great podcast with the awesome Jacob LaRue of Honeydew Roofing. He uses over 57 plus custom automations to keep leads moving, improving customer comms, and streamlining his operations. So best believe he's using that email and texting as well. As Pete mentioned, we have Roofr Academy for on-demand learning. We usually have one new lesson coming out every quarter. Be on the lookout for the next one coming up soon.
Yeah, that was an awesome conversation with Jacob. Just a lot of good insight into how he's running that business. So yeah, that was a very, very good, effective. If you haven't listened to it, there's lots to learn in that conversation with Jacob. So definitely jump on that if you haven't seen it.
Super good insight. He's such a sharp guy, and he's running his team super effectively. It's cool watching the next generation come into roofing and just start to make a difference and utilize tech to their advantage. It's really refreshing to see.
Yeah, what's really interesting, as I've done these Roofr of the Months, we talk to a lot of roofers who are fairly new, in their first couple of years of business. And what I find really intriguing is how lean everyone is running, right? How everyone is able to run companies that are producing more revenue probably than what a company would have 5 or 10 years ago with minimal people, right? With just a very bare bones staff, more or less, right? And a huge part of that is what we're going to talk about today, which is their organization, how they're streamlining things, how they're utilizing their tech, and how they're set up for success, I think is allowing them to just run so many more jobs more efficiently with a lot less people involved.
we always say running things efficiently is important, but at the end of the day, no matter what you want to do for your company, you're looking to make it more profitable. If down the road you're looking to get it acquired through a private equity channel, or you're looking to hand it down, or you're just looking to grow it and have less stress, that tech aspect is going to be a key thing that's going to bring you along that process. And the leaner you can be, like Pete's saying, is not only just how much more effective you are at growing, but as a business operator and an owner or investor, whatever the case is, you're going to be more profitable. You'll have a higher EBITDA. Those things are super important at the end of the day for more money in your pocket, more money that your company's worth, and your overall valuation. So utilizing this stuff is great. Getting to the point where you can replace kind of like some of those jobs that you would and invest into that tech rather than investing in that person is going to be a big thing to help you take that next step as a company and grow fast.
Yeah, and I did a podcast with the chief revenue officer of a company called Live Switch, a live streaming company recently. And one of the things that he said in there that I thought was really super smart and really interesting was he said when he goes into a new company, the first thing that he does is figure out how quickly can I replicate myself. So how can I standardize my processes? How can I build a process, a system in place to where someone can easily come in and do exactly what I'm doing, and I can essentially work myself out of that, right? From a standpoint of a manager, and something that we often talk about with roofers is like, hey, so many guys, especially these guys that are starting companies up, are still very much involved in the day-to-day operation. Our good friend Ben at Roof Tiger is a perfect example of that. What is he in year 5? And you look at how much Ben has been able to pull back from the day-to-day operations because of the system that he built, the people that he's put into that system. The company's essentially, he replicated himself, and he's able to just like move on to other things, focus on other areas of the business, spend more time with his family, do all of these things because he's already got that freedom, and the company's set up to run more or less in his absence, right? So, it's really, really cool to see, and, really interesting to see how people are leveraging tech now to do that. I know when I first came onto the tech side of the world, like that was like unheard of, right? Like no one really worked themselves out of their own business. And so it is very interesting to see these guys doing it in such a short amount of time now.
That's a great point. Before I get into this, the point that I want to make, which is kind of jumping off what you were saying, I'm upset and I want to put it out into the ether, out in the universe. I'm launching a formal complaint against Ben Tiger 2 days ago. I'm after work, cooking, just having a good time, chatting with my wife. And the only thing running through my head over and over again was this damn theme song that he has for his new commercial. And I'm gonna, and it's so catchy, and it was stuck for so long. And to ruin everyone else's day, I'm gonna sing it to you. It's Roof Tiger, put a tiger on your roof. And that's it. That's his entire commercial. And it was stuck in my head for an hour and a half till I looked at my wife and said, I'm going to kill Ben Tiger. And she's like, what the hell's happening?
Where did that come from?
I have had this song stuck in my head for hours and it won't come out. So good job, Ben. Formal complaint away. I'm going to post a comment on your Google. But to your previous point about Ben replicating himself, there's something I learned at a young age from my dad, and kind of building out Roofr and starting here is when I did kind of hiring people and scaling the company and stuff. And you see this a lot in roofing companies as well, is ultimately you have to get through your head as an either early person in the company or a owner, is nobody's going to care as much about the company as you. They might care a lot. They might get pretty darn close, but they're not going to care as much as you. So putting that extra effort in, that time in and stuff like that, it's going to be impossible for you to find that and get somebody to do that. So like you said, you want to replicate yourself as best as possible. And when you're starting a company, I've talked to so many different business owners who say, what would be the thing to take to the next step? Just like a clone of me. Of course, because you care that much. This is your baby. This is what you're doing. It's just like your child you're bringing up. But you're not going to find that out there. And the faster you realize that, the faster you're going to be able to grow, because you're not going to be looking for the thing that you can't find, the intangible. But the best way to do something like that is replicate them is utilize your tech, like Pete's saying. Utilize SOPs, utilize checklists, utilize automations to make sure that things are getting done the way you need them to get done. Pete and I, mostly Pete, have done these talks in front of a bunch of conferences. And one of the things that Pete always said is like, don't make your job board too granular or too broad. Because ultimately, if it's too granular, you're going to get too in the weeds and you're going to have a hard time replicating that. And if it's too broad, you're going to be missing steps. So that sweet spot, Pete, what was that, like 8 to 10 stages?
Yeah, probably about 8 to 10. Yep.
8 to 10 stages, and then build in checklists along the way to make sure that things are getting done. Don't make it overly granular, but you can have that done. We'll go through that a little bit, how you can do that in Roofr today. And also we have a new feature release in one of that stuff too. So spoiler alert, stick around for that based on the task automation. But that's a big thing. You want to replicate yourself. Well, you can't just find that person. So why don't you kind of foolproof it and make sure you have checks and balances along the way to make sure that the things that they get someone as close as you as possible get done so that you can scale effectively and you can stop focusing in your business. You could kind of focus on your business instead and take it to the next step, like Ben Tiger opening up Solar Panther and Gutter Lion. And he's got a whole kind of 3 companies into one because he was able to replicate himself through automations and processes to take that next step.
Yeah. And I think a huge piece of that too is getting the buy-in, right? Like you want to get the buy-in from your team. And the only way you're going to get the buy-in into the culture, into the process, is to really have a process that's easy to understand, that's easily replicated, and also they allows them to give input, right? Like one of the things I think that a mistake that's often made is like, okay, I have a process and we put it in, essentially create a workflow, let's say, and we don't ever look at it again, right? And I think that one of the pieces that's missed is like, you should always be fine tuning that process. And there's no better group of people to help you do that than your own team. Right? They're living that process every day, so find out where their headaches are, find out where their roadblocks are in that process, figure out where you can potentially maybe insert a little bit more tech, automation, something like that. Maybe it's, just tweaking the way things flow. There's all these things that you can do to just continue to fine tune that, but relying on your team for that input is huge. And it gives them more buy-in because now they've got skin in the game, they've got input, they're essentially building their own process, right? And then now it makes it easier for everyone to be hands-on and be involved and be more on board with replicating that process for the next person.
And that was a great thing about that podcast you did with Jacob LaRue. Again, guys, roofr.com/podcast. The last Roofr of the month is Jacob LaRue. Really good conversation about going back and revisiting your processes. I think your exact question was, how often do you revisit it? And he said constantly. And the other thing that he named too is like, and this is super important, is when a mistake is made, it doesn't mean that was done purposefully. It means that there was a break in the process somewhere. We need to add in another check, another balance, another situation, or anything like that to make sure that stuff doesn't happen again. So like, it's like, I can't remember what movie it was, but it's like happy mistakes. Like that's what people call that. It's like, okay, we effed up. That sucks. What are we going to do from it? Are we going to be upset? Sure. But more importantly, how are we going to fix that? What is that next step there? And that's super important. And then going back to your replicability, that's so important when you're looking to scale. Because I talked to a company, I think it was last month, and they went from 0 to like 3 locations. I don't think it was like 30 or 40 employees within like a couple years and was killing it. And when he thought he was ready to kind of take that step back, spend more time, things went bad and he went all the way back down to 1 location real quick. Bad in installs, bad stuff. And then it gets into the reputation and stuff. And one thing he said was that I scaled too fast without being able to replicate it. And if you think about that, making sure that you have your job board organized and navigating throughout that, those automations set up, everything that we're about to go through is super important. But you got to make sure that it's replicable, not just because you want to be able to speed up that hiring process, but ultimately you want those people to be there long term. Retention is a huge problem in our industry, especially among sales reps. So let's find out a way that you can scale somebody quickly, make them comfortable, make them good, so that they start selling more roofs. So they're happy, they're getting paid, and you're getting paid, and that circle goes round and round and round. And that's super important to build out. And you're not going to be able to do that without process changes and looking back on those and updating those processes as you go along. And what it also allows you to do is avoid hiring those that have bad habits. There's a lot of like seasoned salespeople in here that are just kind of stuck in their ways. And Pete's always mentioned like, maybe your best person is someone who you can teach roofing to, but has the innate customer experience and the customer expertise kind of nailed down, like Chick-fil-A employees. They're always great, but how do we get somebody replicated and hired into Roofr very quickly so that they can start selling jobs? You have to have that process in place. And this is a great way to kind of start here.
Yeah, I had a guy come by the other day that was knocking on doors selling spraying for bugs, right? Like he was a pest control salesman, door-to-door salesman, but just handled himself like if I owned a roofing company, I probably would have stole him on the spot from the pest control company because he was very good. He handled himself really well. He interacted with my kids very well.
Nice.
Like my son wanted to be his best friend instantly. He's like showing them pictures of his dirt bikes on his phone and stuff like that. So yeah, he would have been a great hire, perfect person. Obviously a little bit of sales experience, younger guy, obviously a go-getter, he's out knocking doors, would have been a perfect pickup, for a roofing contractor who had a good process and could just plug him in. He would have probably found a success right away. That's the first thing that actually came to my mind having a conversation with him. It's like this guy in a good process would absolutely kill it.
It's so cool seeing those people. I get like SDR calls all the time from companies looking to get Roofr to use their product, whether it's a partnership or it's like a tech platform for call recording, whatever. And every once in a while, you get like a really good one. And I'll always go like, hey, is this line recorded? And they're like, what? No. I'm like, it's not going to gong or anything. He's just like, no. I was like, cool. You got a good process. You got a good flow. There's some recs up at Roofr.com. So if you're I don't know how you're being treated there, but we have the processes in place to help you shine, man. So do the same thing with your roofing company. You find that out. A great example of that is, and shout out to Mark, who just started his own company. But Mark and Martin from Monarch Roofing. Mark just started his own company as well. Mark was Martin's right-hand man for, the majority of their growth and their partners and their sales training platform as well. And Martin found Mark at his favorite sushi restaurant. He was the GM as his favorite restaurant, and he just always got the best customer experience, the best conversations, the attention to detail and everything. And he's like, I want this guy. So don't be afraid to find somebody who's outside of the roofing industry, because you can teach them roofing as long as they have those skills and build in that process as well.
Yeah. All right, well, let's jump into it here and dive into the job board a bit and talk through some of these things that we've been talking about and how you can leverage Roofr to really organize yourself a little bit better.
Yeah, so with the job board here, just a little pro tip, guys. If you find that you're on a smaller screen, usually I'm on like my monitor, but today I'm just on my laptop. But if you ever need a little bit more room, the little toggle button here helps you so much. I love just bringing it down small and it opens up that door. But like Pete said, when you get Roofr, you're going to get whether you sign on as a pay-as-you-go a user or one of the subscriptions, you're going to have standard job cards built in. I always think about the job cards as your digital whiteboard. This is your swim lanes for where your company will go. And depending on the plan, you're going to be able to edit these. So if you're on premium or elite, you're going to be able to edit the names and or add new ones and kind of create multiple workflows. But the way to look at this, again, going back to what Pete was saying, is you want around that 8 to 10 different stages there. Now, we're going to take away in this process the stages for lost and unqualified, because that's just the end state there. But if you look at this is just like a basic one that I've created. You got new lead, appointment scheduled, proposal sent and presented, proposal signed, pre-production, production, post-production, payments, and job completed. That's 9 stages right there. And being able to take them across is super important. And Pete, you've always said, if you don't have a process on paper right now, do yourself a favor, whether you're starting out or you've been in business a long time, write your process out on paper.
Yeah, I mean, when I was back in customer success, one of the first things you would do when you were helping customers set up their CRM is you say, walk me through your process. Lead comes in. Okay, great. What happens next? Okay, you schedule an appointment. Okay, great. What happens next? Just think through like one step at a time. And that's essentially you have a process. I think Ty Backer said, maybe your process is figure it the hell out, right? It's still a process, not a good one, obviously, but it is a process, right? So everyone has some sort of process. Maybe you just haven't put it on paper yet. If you haven't, I always challenge you to do so. Even if you are using Roofr right now and you have a workflow in here, sit down with the team one day and let's go through it and just say like, okay, hey, what happens next? Whose responsibility is this? What's important information for you to get from the person before you? All these things are going to help you to not only build out a really strong workflow, but then potentially to build all the sub resources like checklists and tasks and all of these other things that you're going to need to really kind of hone this process in a bit. And they all supplement the job board, right?
And that's a big part there. Sorry, I realized I switched screen.
Yeah, you're all good.
But it's a big part of that job process. And I like that, how you're saying, sit down with your team, like what happens next? And like, again, we're looking at this again, if you have a digital whiteboard. I know so many roofing companies that I talk to, in the background of their call, if they're in their office, there's a giant whiteboard with just straight lines across, titles on the top. And a lot of the times you see those sticky notes pulled over. Yep. And if you're new to something like this is called a Kanban board. What the job board is, this is essentially a digital whiteboard, like I'm saying, with swim lanes across. And take that job card and drag it to the next stage. So always look at that. The way you're saying, I love that, is talk with your team. Like, okay, new lead comes in. What happens after that? Okay, appointment is scheduled. After the appointment is scheduled, what do? We do an inspection. We do a proposal. We do all that stuff. And if you start to talk and go back and forth on what are the little things involved with it, but you're not sure if that should be a stage, keep that in mind, write that down, and that could be a task. As you can see, I have tasks built out underneath this, and it opens up each section. We'll get into those tasks and how you can build those out in a second, but think about those big, large swim lanes that you're looking at, the big milestones, and you're trying to be around 8 to 10, and anything that's ancillary inside that appointment scheduled, I need them to do an inspection, take photos, measure the roof, all that stuff. Doesn't need to be its own swim lane in itself, but it could be a task that are built in to make sure that they're done later. So I love building that stuff out. And if you're on the elite plan at Roofr, by the way, you can have up to 3 different pipelines, which is great. In our case, we call them workflows. You can have like a retail, insurance, commercial. You can have per location. You can have a bunch of different things that you can build up there. Maybe there's a repair option in there. What's nice is if you go into the settings, you can create those 3 workflows. You can create a default one, which is nice to have. And then when you go into these and hit manage, you can see how we can add different things in. Now I'm showing you guys again from an elite point of view, but different workflows, such as retail, insurance, and commercial, will have different stages. Some might be more granular, some will be more broad. But it's important to know that things can be different, and this is how you can build it up. So if you're on insurance, for example, you might be waiting on some paperwork there, and then you have all the information here. Then you have appointment schedule, adjuster meetings, definitely for this only. Proposal presented is going to be the similar one here. You have the proposal follow-up. You can see how you can add things in, change them. You can change the flow of them by updating it. And if you need to add something in, like, congratulate. Wow, that's a okay, there it is. That was actually really close. You could add that in, and there you have a new stage, and you could put it in where you need it to be. So you're able to really kind of build that stuff out. Keep in mind, there's a couple stages that you can't eliminate, like new lead, complete job, lost jobs, and unqualified. Those are good for data that we need to pull in for a performance dashboard, but you can build these up the way that you need them to be a little bit more nimble and a little bit more out of the box. Ultimately, there are some CRMs out there that when you sign up, they have 5 stages, and those are the 5 that you're going to have to use. We know that there's multiple things that are built into those 5 stages, so we allow a little bit more customization on that front.
Yeah, I think there's a sweet spot, right? Like I think 5 stages is a bit high level for my taste, but I think what you'll find a lot of times too, if you sit down with your team and you start to work through it, and like Nick said, maybe there's some things that as you work through there, you start to realize like, hey, there's some things that need to be done at this specific point in the process, but maybe they're not as crucial as needing a high level workflow item for them. You know, what you'll find a lot of times is that one of 2 things happens. You either realize that you have some of those things already added in to your workflow, and now your workflow is probably overly granular, or you're missing stuff, right? You know, like one stage that I probably would add to this, Nick, honestly, is a follow-up stage after we present a proposal, right? So, you know, like something like that. But you don't know. Like it's all based on how your team does business and what makes sense for them. And where specifically, as we dive into this more, like you'll see Nick's going to add some automations, right? And like, where do we want our automations to live? What stages do we want to trigger those on? So, those are important things to keep in mind as we look at this. And like Nick and I said at the top, you always want to be looking at this, revisiting it, tweaking it. Things change, right? You may change your process around. I see a lot of contractors right now changing their process around how they're dealing with incoming phone calls, how their leads are flowing in through Calendly bookings and stuff like that. So that's changing things on the front end as to speed to lead and how they're getting to the customer. So that's going to probably tweak their process a bit and maybe add a stage or remove a stage from their workflow. As technology evolves, we constantly want to be able to take a look and see what we can potentially do different.
It's a big point there. And as you can see, things change, like Pete was saying. And if you want to take a look at everything kind of compared, you could turn on all the workflows and it's going to break down where each one of them are. So from the start, you'll see which ones are like, what stage does this live in? What workflow does this stage live in? So for example, new leads in retail, insurance, and commercial, but waiting on paperwork, just insurance, appointment schedules for retail and insurance. You can see where it all ties in. And in each job card, you can see where they live primarily. So this one's in insurance. This one, this one is retail. This one's insurance. You can see which ones are built in throughout the commercial and everything, and how this can build out to help you on your day-to-day. So super important things to build that in, including that proposal follow-up, which you can have built in directly here. And you can have automations move those stage movement as well, which I highly recommend, because a clean CRM is going to allow you to attack those jobs way quicker. Make sure that your customer comms are built into that. You can make sure that you're closing these jobs faster, and you can increase that customer experience. And we know from all of our past masterclasses and all the people we talk to, that customer experience is one of the biggest points for you getting referrals and you getting those reviews built in. So this is a great way to add that and tie that all together.
Yeah, it ultimately should be the driving force behind most of the decisions that you make around how your process flows, what technology you're using. In the back of your mind, kind of the foundational piece should always be that customer experience, because it's going to drive, if you drive the customer experience, it's going to drive a better process, more streamlined setup for your team. Like Nick's going to show like the automations involved and things like that. One thing I want to note here too, is if you notice at the top, you can see a number and a dollar value, right? And those are important, right? Because as we, at a high level, right? If I'm a manager, an owner, whatever that case may be, having that visibility of how many jobs are in that stage on any given day when I open this, but more importantly, the dollar value associated with those jobs, I can start to recognize where I have bottlenecks. If I've got a lot of jobs building up in one stage of my workflow, odds are there's a reason why, right? Something is happening that's not allowing those jobs, whether it's, let's say, a sales to production handoff or permitting, if you're depending on where you're at, right? Like all these things that could potentially come into play that are causing a log jam. And we can actually see that visibly here by just looking and saying like, okay, why are there 200 appointments scheduled? Like, are these just not being dispositioned correctly? Is someone not going in and moving them to job lost or to proposal signed or whatever? Do we need to put an automation in play? And how much money is tied up in our workflow on any given day? I think it holds more weight, right? Specifically, if you're sitting in a Monday morning sales meeting and you're looking at these numbers with the team and you can say, hey, there's $250,000 sitting in follow-up. What can we do better, team? Like, we're not following up. I always tell the story about how when I started in the CRM side of things, I remember looking at a customer's workflow and he had a follow-up stage and there was like hundreds of jobs in follow-ups and there was almost $750,000 sitting in follow-up. And when I asked him about it, he's like, oh, they're just jobs that we never followed up on that essentially now are pretty much lost. They're so old, they're not even worth revisiting, which probably wasn't the case. I mean, who knows whether those customers were even sold or not, right? But it was the mindset of like, that's where jobs went to die, right? Like if they weren't signed immediately, they were just moving them to follow-up and forgetting about them. And, that's something that we looked at and we were like, hey, maybe there's a way for you guys to better address these. His comment to me was, well, that's my sales team who just, once they drop a proposal off, they move on to the next appointment and they aren't really good at following up, right? Maybe that's something we help with. Maybe that's something that we need a better process around. But having the visibility here helps us to identify those areas of opportunity, as we like to call them, and be able
iterate on that process.
and be able to fine tune. Like that's how we fine tune. We look at where the numbers are building up, where there's a hole in the process. So there's a big difference between process issues and performance issues, right? And I think sometimes we blur the lines of like, oh, my guys just suck. They don't follow up. Sometimes it's not the guys, right? Sometimes it's the process.
And sometimes you need to like help out with the process with automations. If
Correct.
your guys aren't following up, there's a stat that you had one time that was on average, it takes 6 to 8 follow-ups for someone to close, 6 to 8 different touches for someone to close. We all want those kitchen table sales. We all want those one-call closes. But especially in the reality and the macro that we're living in nowadays, you're probably not going to get that. So how do you make sure that you're on top of things and how to make sure you're following up? Well, maybe automate that. Maybe not leave it up to human error. Because I always know, even as a salesperson, and I need to get better at this too, but sometimes I call someone to follow up just for the sake that I need to follow up.
Right.
Like it's just, I'm going through the motions and it's just, I'm not providing value in that. Whereas if I automate this process, if I can build this into my job cards so that if it's staying in a stage for X amount of hours or days or weeks, I can send out this message. And if it's another 2 weeks here, I can send out a different message. Nurture that client. Make sure that you're always following up so that your team can focus on the stuff that you want them to do. Drum up more business, go knock on some more doors, all that stuff. And if somebody responds and raises their hands, that's a sign for you to circle back and get them. But never leave something up to the thing that I hear all the time, and you just hit it right on the head, Pete, is my guy's this, my guy's that. Well, you're the owner, aren't you? Well, how do we figure this out? We're not reviewing the problems. We're not reviewing the things that can optimize. And that's where like Roofr really comes in. The ability to see, visualize, and optimize. But you also have that team behind you with the implementation specialists and your AMs that are your Roofr experts that are going to be here to help you out with all those optimizations.
Well, and I think the one thing that the technology does for you is it gives you the ability to be proactive and not reactive. Like, why are we waiting until that customer calls and says, hey, did you forget about us? When we could have probably contacted that customer a few times with an automation or a text or something like that and kept them completely in the loop, of where their job was at, what the status of things were, maybe followed up with them. Maybe they've been waiting on us to answer a question before they sign a contract, something like that, And I think so many times traditionally we're reactive, right? Like we're trying to just wait for them to make a move and then reacting to it. And that's where we lose a lot of business, right? Because, if we push the envelope, like there's a perfect example. I talked to a customer. He was showing me his door knocking app where his guys won a job after the 13th time they knocked the same door. And that's persistence, right? But that's being proactive. Hey, they're going back. They know this woman's got damage. They're going to go back. They're going to keep knocking her door and saying like, hey, we're here again. We're across the street. What do you think about an inspection this time? Oh, no, thanks. We're not in the market for it. Okay, great. We'll see you in a couple months, right? We'll come back and try again. And it worked 13 times. She finally gave in and said yes, and they won, but it was because they were proactive. So, I think utilizing these tools and think through that process, right? Like what can you do in your process we often talk about speed to lead. In the podcast I did the other day, he brought up one that I'd never heard before, race to face, which I thought was genius, right? Is like, not only are we the first person to communicate, but how quickly is our process allowing us to get a face in front of that person? Because let's be honest, the number one way to close jobs in the roofing space is to do that inspection and be there face to face. Like Nick said, that kitchen table meeting, right? And being able to walk through, develop that trust factor, and close that sale. So, how quickly are we able to do that? What does our process warrant to be proactive about getting out there and being the first person to show our face on the property?
And then having that process, like you said, to make sure that you don't have to do a hard close. People will get turned off by the Rodney Webb style of just like, I'm sitting with you for 6 hours until you make it.
I'm not leaving until you say yes.
Look, I respect that. And if anybody has been in the chat or watching later has been one of my customers, you probably kind of got a sense of that from me as well. I'm going to call you until I get an answer, yes, no, or later. But when you're looking at big ticket items like a roof, like you're looking at 5 figures or more, You want that ability to try to close on the spot if they're not ready. Just be like, not a problem. I'm going to email this out to you. And then, you know what? I'll follow up in a couple days. And as you can see, while we're talking there, I built out 2 quick automations to follow up with them on opposite days. So I have a email for after 6 days of it being in sent and not signed. I have a proposal follow-up email. And then in 8 days, so 2 days after that, I have a follow-up text. And you can kind of bounce them back and forth and just let them know that you're always there. Change up the messaging, anything else that you want, link to the proposals, all that stuff to really open up that conversation there. But being able to have that process built in and knowing that it's built in on those stages for those proposals sent, the proposal follow-up, the new lead, the production, and all that stuff is going to be invaluable to you as a company to make sure that you can run leaner.
One of the things that I really like that a couple of our customers are doing is they're following up. They're supplementing the email with a text.
Yeah.
Essentially just shooting a text saying like, hey, make sure to check your email. We just sent you an email. Mm-hmm. Right. And I think it's super smart, right? Because you're able to convey the information more detailed, right? Probably in an email, but you're directing them there with that text message, right? So you're reinforcing it with the piece of information that's going to probably get opened more so than the email. I think it's like a 90% open rate, on the text message. And if it leads them to that email with all the information, then it just served its purpose, right? And I think that it's a super smart way to leverage the two of them complementary of each other. We're seeing more and more of our contractors doing that, which I think is a really effective move. It's just an interesting use of the product, but they're setting up an automation to do it, right?
Yeah, this is a great example of it. For anybody who's new to Roofr automations or unsure on how robust our automations are, they're super robust. Listen to that podcast with Jacob LaRue, who's got almost 60 different podcasts built into a system there. So one thing is that you're going to be looking at if and then statements, and sometimes there's an and. So if a proposal status changes to sent, meaning that you're sending that email out anyways through that process, and the workflow is retail. We have 3 different workflows, remember, retail, insurance, and commercial. Then I want to send a text to the customer, and here is the text copy directly linked in there. I can delay it for business hours, which I would highly recommend, just so you don't piss off anybody, or delay it for a couple hours, weeks, and everything else. And that's as easy as it is to build out those automations and open that stuff up. And you can open that to make sure that everything is set up. For texting, by the way, delaying it for business hours is a legal necessity as well, as it is illegal against the FTC to text outside of business hours unless it's a one-to-one text. So any automations has to be through that. So you can see how that can be built out really easily and create that process that you want. And the way that I have these processes built in is that if you book something in the calendar, it automatically moves it to appointment schedules and sends out an email and text for communication. If I book a calendar appointment for a material drop, it's going to move it to pre-production automatically and send an email saying, hey, here's the things to look out. This is the date and time and everything that I'm going to be dropping off the material, safety precautions, things to work out, and everything else. If I send out a roof install on the calendar, it's going to send out that automation as well. But also for those proposal follow-ups, those new lead follow-ups, if they're not moving out a new lead after 2 days, I'm sending them an email and text. Be like, hey, let's book an appointment in. You want to entice and communicate with the customer along that way. And a good way of making sure that you're building that stuff out are these tasks. As you can see the amount that it's done on these job cards. You can see what's going on in these job cards as well. The last time it was updated, how long they've been in the stages, who it's assigned to, all of that stuff here. And when you open up a job card, I can go directly into tasks. Oops. Here you can see these automated tasks built in where your team can click them off, and you're saying to replicate you clone you as a person. You could add these stuff in, and you could have them in here where they're just kind of going through them nice and easy. Or if you're building them out, one of the cool things you can do now is stage blocking. So if we're going to make sure we call and leave a message for the customer, whatever the thing is, I can make sure that it's assigned to one of my reps. I can make sure I have a due date on it, and I can block stage transition. And what that means is whether I do it through the automations or whether I do it here, I can now not move my stages unless this is checked off. Well, I'm going to add that task here. As you can see, it's a blocking task, and now I cannot move those automations until I have that complete. If I try to manually move this, it's going to make sure that I can't move the job unless I have that tracked. So what this is going to do is really bring in that I need to clone myself. And I'm worried that my guys are going to frivolously just check all these things off just to get to the next stage. And how do I know things are getting done? Well, if they check this off, it better be done, because you've built blocking state tasks to make sure that it's all dialed in here, and ensures that you have a good process built in throughout it. And like you said, you can build them one-on-one directly in there, or I can build it in the automations process here and create appointment scheduled automations for tasks. Geez, this is a masterclass in disappointing spelling. You must be appalled.
Thank God for a quick spell check, right?
That's what it's there for. Sometimes it doesn't know what I'm trying to say, but you can see how you can have different stages for if. So this job stage in this case, by the way, if you have the signature document status, proposal status, or event, the event one is super cool because it really opens up a lot of opportunities here. But if the job stage changes to a new stage, like appointment schedule in this case, then I want to create these tasks. When I'm creating these tasks, I can go confirm time with customer. I could, number one, make sure that it's always assigned to the job assignee, so automatic assignee. Stage blocking, so it's going to be notified and it's going to block that stuff there, and I can go on to the next one. Pick weather, shield, whatever you need in there. Again, making sure it's for the assignee and drop that task in. I could save this automation to make sure that everything is dialed in appropriately, so that these things are set up each and every time I have a new stage. And those stage blocking is something that a lot of you guys have been asking for a long time, and we agreed. We're like, this is a really valuable part. We just wanted to make sure that we built it in properly. So now you have those tasks that block stage automations that are going to be there to set you up for success.
Yeah, I love this because, one, it keeps things from slipping through the cracks, right? If it's blocking the stage, like obviously, like Nick said, it can't accidentally get checked off. Someone has to physically go there and make the conscious decision to check it off. And it adds a level of accountability. So if you have new salespeople to the process, or like Nick said, you've got some old folks that are stuck in their ways and want to do things a specific way, this is a great way to be able to hold people accountable and say, hey, you checked this off. I don't see it. You made the conscious decision to check the box, right? Like, obviously we've got something going on here, right? So you're able to dial the process in a bit with your team by using this. So it holds a lot of value here to be able to block that stage move, with those specific tasks. And tasks in general, I think, are just underutilized a lot of times. I'm a big checklist person. And, there's so many nuances to what we're doing here, whether it be at a sales appointment, whether it be pre-production, whether it be in production, even post-production, right? Like, even, okay, we finished a job.
Pick the nails up, all that.
Yeah. I see these guys, like, the roofing's going on like crazy around me. And I always like to watch the setup at the beginning and the breakdown at the end, see what each team is doing to clean up, and, how attentive they are to leaving the property, how organized it is, how clean are they leaving it, what are they doing if they have extra materials. All these things I find very interesting to watch them, because then you kind of really find out the quality of the group and the process that's in place.
And reviews after too. It's those
exactly.
That have those attention to details, who have those checklists and stuff. So you could really build that stuff out. And as you can see in this one, just to show you how these stage blocking works, even for automations. You saw me on the screen book a time for a sales appointment in the calendar. I have automations that automatically go out to make sure that these are all set up. So I have these emails and texts going out to the customer, but if you notice, it's still sitting in new lead because I created that blocking task. So it even blocks automations. But once I click this and I go back and refresh, you're going to see that move directly into appointment scheduled right off the bat like that. So it's really easy to work, and it's kind of foolproof to make sure that you can block these stage transitions. You can open these things up and really create something where you're comfortable, that you can step away and work on the company, spend more time with the family, and run lean and effectively with running that stuff as well. And then the last thing I'll bring up, just a spoiler alert for a future one. We do have that signatures tool now as well. So if you're looking for a more advanced checklist that you want on the job, for like a roof inspection checklist, you can build these directly into your system with dynamic fields that auto-populate directly for the customer and contractor, fillable fields, all built in to make sure that everything is dialed in the way that you need it to be. And that's going to help you out immensely throughout that process. So you can see I'm on the spot here and I'm ready to sign now as a field rep. I can start checking off the stuff that I need to do throughout this process, making my life a lot easier.
If you have specific checklists that you like for your team to review with the customer, or potentially you need the customer to sign off that things have been reviewed, like, hey, sign off here that, you're responsible for your plants and we're not, so if we kill your rose bush that you've had planted there forever,
Yeah.
it was on you to cover that, right? Sign here, right? So these type of checklists that give you a little bit more functionality, potentially, if that's part of your process, it's a great way to dial that stuff in and be able to get potentially that customer signature. I even knew a guy that had a spot for his customers to initial and also for his sales rep to initial. And that was like his foolproof way of saying like, hey, we reviewed this with you. You signed off. Our guy signed off. I know that you guys had that conversation. So just another level of accountability there. So, just so many good tools built into the product right now to be able to really dial in that process and take the guesswork out of it, right? Like one of the things that, as Nick's showing you guys all this, one of the things that I was thinking is it's removing a lot of the human error, right? And the ability for like me to do it any differently. Like if Nick and I went out to quote a job in this workflow, we're essentially going to do it exactly the same way because we don't have a choice, right? Like the process is so dialed in with the stage blocks and the checklists that we're going to follow exactly the same pattern, which goes back to what Nick and I talked about with the customer experience, right? Now our customer experience is replicable no matter who's doing it, no matter which salesman is out there, no matter who they're talking to in the company, the whole entire thing's going to flow the same way. And then if they suggest their friend down the street, his experience is going to be exactly the same. And now, you get that consistency and that quality, right? Because that's essentially what it equates to, right? Is like now these guys are a quality team because I know what to expect, right? I know that, hey, the 3 other people that recommended them all said this is what happened. And that's exactly how it happened when it came to me, right? So, and that equates to the perception of being a quality company. So all things to keep in mind here as you're building these out and fine tuning them, right? Like it's probably not going to nail it. We used to say the ideal situation is probably 3 tweaks. When you build a workflow, it's probably going to take you tweaking it 3 times to get it exactly how you want it.
100%. And that's the important part. Again, the tweaking, building out, iteration, all that stuff. Building those automations to just make sure that anytime you see something broken and you're making those changes and iterations and updating, try to see if technology can solve it first. People make mistakes. People forget. Things get busy. Things come up. Sometimes you guys go to the doctors or you get in a car accident, whatever the case is. Make sure that your process is not interrupted by life happening. And that's where technology can really help you out. Set up your stuff, set up your automations to ensure that life doesn't get in the way. Life finds a way to interrupt your process. Don't let it do it by automations. But building up all this stuff is super important. So take your time. I know we got some time for some questions again, and don't forget the sock draw, but take your time to take a look at this stuff. In your help center at the bottom, we do have the ability for you to have these kind of built in for our education sessions. We have them with our Roofr Academy. All these things, our implementation teams here for you. So just take a look and see how we can help out. Send us an email. We're here for you and you have the support for it. And don't just think of us, and Pete and I have said this a million times, don't just think of us as Roofr employees. Look at us on how we've helped other customers build out their process to work as needed to help them scale and help them take those next steps. Because ultimately, these are Roofr advisors. They'll tell you how they've seen successful roofing companies scale with Roofr and with other tools by building out processes with you.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, we've had a pretty quiet chat today. If anybody's got any questions, feel free to throw them in right now. We can jump on them and answer them here. But as always, like Nick said, if you ever have questions afterwards, if you think of something, if you get into your Roofr account, something doesn't make sense, or you can't find something that Nick showed you, feel free to reach out, hit up Nick, or you always have access to support and customer success to help dial things in for you. Hopefully you guys got something good out of today and more effectively utilizing your job board in Roofr. And as always, the Roofr team is always here for you. So Joel, draw for the socks. Let's do it.
Roll.
Nice.
Congrats, Jeanette Wolf. You won the socks.
Winner.
So Joel's going to be reaching out for your info. We'll send those socks your way. Take a photo with them, put them online, tag us at Roofr.
Thank you, guys. We really appreciate you jumping on today. Like Nick mentioned in the beginning, we've got some really good masterclasses coming down the pipe with some of the newer stuff we have going on. So be sure to jump on for those. Email and texting is the next one, I believe.
The email, by the way, is an integration you guys have been asking for. So keep an ear down to that. And there's another one that comes after that that's live now in beta. So if you guys like anything that rides with Schmoogle Schmail, and Schmoogle Schmalander, those things, just reach out to your Roofr account representative because we might be able to help you out.
Yeah. And so definitely jump on for that one. Obviously, email and text a big part of the communication with the customer and your team. So, obviously jump on. We'll get some tips on how to leverage that a little bit better in the product. That was really nicely done with the code words there. I'm impressed.
Today, I'm just on it.
So thank you guys for joining us. And Nick and I will see you next time on the Roofr Masterclass. Thank you, everybody.
See you, everyone.
Have a good night.
Bye.